right, welcome back. It's that time of year. The misinformation is flowing, and I don't expect the next 20 minutes to be any different. So, but on a serious note, I mean, it's been a great process. Last 2.5 months working with Coach Wilks and his staff has been fantastic. Those guys have done an unbelievable job, not only acquiring information, but working with our scouting staff. And the two groups have blended together quite nicely. Been outstanding dialogue. Our primary board is finished, and tomorrow afternoon and Friday we will conclude with the top 120. So it's that time of year, and we're excited. Certainly 8 picks in this draft so far. And the one thing that's for me really exciting is to look at the amount of work that we put into this process. Right now, there's a little under 5,000 reports in total that have been written between our coaching and our scouting staff, and just a shade under 2,000 players have been written. So we've left no stone unturned, from big schools to small schools, and we certainly searched high and low, and extremely proud of the work that's been put in. So we'll open it up for questions.
Steve, in your 5 or 6 years, have your methods changed much or evolved? Is your value system different now than it was, 5 to 6 years ago?
I mean, I think you always tweak a few things based on really self-evaluation. When you look back at some of the things you feel like you should have done differently, and look at whether mistakes are being made or areas where you can actually improve. And we've done that, whether it's adding some analytical work just to make sure the checks and balances system is in place, or whether it's areas of concern in terms of character, where we've added some key points to the process. So, it's something it's always evolving, and it's always an area where you can grow and get better. So we've certainly adjusted some of those things.
Is the price of moving up into the top quarterback reach becoming even more prohibitive year after year because the quarterback position seems to be such a flashpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think really when you look at it, it's what type of players are there for the team that's willing to trade. I mean, number one, to trade up, you have to find a partner. Number two, what players on the board when that team is willing to trade? I mean, if it's a dynamic player at that position that is a game changer, they're not going to take anything short of the mortgage for the house, the farm, and everything to come up. So it's an inexact science, and really at the end of the day, you can throw the trade chart off your desk, because you have to be willing to be able to give up what you're comfortable with.
Are you thinking the same going the other way, Steve? Does it work like when you've been known more to go down than up because you get extra picks?
Yeah, I mean, you'd love to acquire more picks, but again, what players on the board? And that's something you have to decide based on grade, based on the information that you have, and based on your team needs.
How do you guys grade out this quarterback draft class, both of you? In terms of the top 6, is it, some people are saying it's 83, potentially, that's a stretch. Is it potential there for this to be a great class, or is it, we'll wait and see?
I think you have to wait and see, in my opinion. I think there's some good quarterbacks that are coming out this year across the board, but hindsight, you really don't know how they're going to pan out. I mean, you go by the body of work of what they put in college and the things they've been doing with the combine and the pro day. But I think it's a great class, and we just have to wait and see.
Steve, how much do you get out of these visits? I mean, learning not so much the player, but the person.
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, that's one of the things I've talked about over the years is when you go back and you look at some of the mistakes that we or any other organization has made, what's the basis for it? And generally it's the person more so than the player. These guys all have a degree of talent. We have to judge the mental part of it and how much they love it from a passion standpoint. But that is 15 minutes at Indianapolis is not long enough, which is why we bring all 30 players in for visits, which is why we fly throughout the country and go take visits to the college campuses and get to know them and find out a lot of information, not only from the position coach to the coordinator, the head coach. We go as far to talk to the janitors. We talk to the secretaries. We want to know everything about these young men when we draft them. And we all know it's an inexact process, and that's to Bob's question. I mean, with these quarterbacks, there is potential on all the guys at the top, but not one of them have taken a snap in the NFL, so there's still a projection.
Coach Wilks, this is your first time being a key decision maker in the war room like this. Do you try to prepare for it in any certain ways? Do you guys run through simulations as far as having only a certain amount of time to make these pretty key decisions with Steve and Michael?
As Steve has just mentioned, the process has been outstanding. You know, the coaches as well as the scouts have been working well with one another, putting in the time, most importantly, gathering the data and information. So the biggest thing that we've talked about, and Steve just mentioned it, is the character. You know, one thing that I've learned coming here in a short period of time, man, we got great men in that locker room, good character guys, good football players on the field, but also guys that are going to represent this team well in the community. So that's what we're looking for in the draft, to continue to bring guys in that have our certain DNA.
Steve, when you obviously touched on the trading and needing partners and all that, how long is that process? I mean, does it wait until the draft, all the draft slots are finalized at the end of the season? Or are you already thinking about it in the middle of last season? How much impact does how this team finished on the field and changing the draft? I mean, how much did that change? I mean, when do you start looking at that stuff?
I mean, I think you evaluate it all along when you look at the draft class, but until you really can, to me, realize which players in which slot on draft day, I mean, it's hard to talk about trading up because, again, you know, if you're trading up to 1, that's a different story. If you're trading up to 2, then you have to love 2 players. I mean, it's just a sliding scale. So for me, any of the draft day trades that we've made or would like to make, it's usually when you're on the clock or you're getting close to being on the clock because you're sure that player that you covet so much is going to be there your pick. So it's a sliding scale, and again, it's an inexact science. More than anything, if you're giving up compensation, how much are you mortgaging the farm? You know, how much is it going to impact your organization moving forward? Because with the salary cap, the amount of players that we're playing with our situation right now, we have to have some young guys have success.
For both of you in the interview process, I would imagine it was really important to know you could work together or find out. How do you go about being comfortable with each other and knowing the dynamic would work, a new coach with a GM?
I mean, for me, it starts with just constant dialogue, making sure that we're on the same page, making sure from my end that he understands what we expect, and really the number one piece of it all is respect. You know, I have to respect his opinion. We have to have the same vision, which we basically found through the interview process. I think we knew that we could be on the same page, as well as, you know, bringing Michael into the loop and that sort of thing. But you have to have respect for each other. You have to understand what the process involves. And you have to draw the line, like we talked about before. You can't blur those lines that cross over into dysfunction. Coach has got a job to do. I've got a job to do. At the end of the day, we're working towards one same solid goal.
You had so much success, second, third rounds with Baker last year. Of course, David Johnson and all the third round success. How's this depth of this draft compared to some of those years?
So what are you saying? Trade out of first?
I said that.
No. No, I mean, it's. I think every round has players in it that we'll be excited about. We know that the first round picks have all the bells and whistles, but there's no doubt that not only are guys in the middle rounds going to have success, but we've seen free agents have a tremendous amount of success. I mean, a guy like Tony Jefferson that we signed as a free agent, he came out of Oklahoma, and I just talked about him this morning with our scouts. You know, Tony was a guy who loved the game, but he lacked some of the skill sets that you look for in that position. He ran 4.77 at the combine that year. He was 5'10", so he was overlooked. Now Tony Jefferson makes $9 million, so he's doing okay for himself.
Good. You helped him.
Steve, can you? This is a year where there's several in-state players. Kirk, Andrews, the high school, the college guys at ASU, U of A. Can you talk a little bit about the in-state players as much as you're willing to?
Yeah, I mean, I've been impressed with all those guys, and that's the great beauty of the system that's in place is we're able to work out those guys locally, and we're allowed to also have them in for visits, which doesn't count against our 30. So getting to know a lot of those local kids, the one thing that really jumps out to me is how much the high school football here has improved, and it's something for us to all be proud of, certainly in the community. And not only that, but the character that some of these guys have, and getting to spend time with Kirk and Mark Andrews. Those guys are phenomenal kids, great character, and they're really talented football players, and I think both those guys are going to have a tremendous amount of success in our league.
There's been a lot written about this franchise's need to get a quarterback in the future this year, next year. What's your take on all that, the importance of it this year, next year, whenever?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any secret. I think the biggest issue comes with the supply and demand at the position. Where is a franchise quarterback going to be available? If you're willing to trade, what's the compensation for it? So at the end of the day, I mean, again, it's no secret, but are you willing to put the franchise in a position to be set back for years if you're not right? I mean, it can be crippling for us if we traded the next couple drafts to go get a player that has never taken a snap and doesn't have success. So there's a lot of moving parts to it, but at the end of the day, we got to do the best thing for the organization. And last time around, we traded basically a ham sandwich, as the one writer said, and it worked out pretty good.
At some point, do you have to take that risk where maybe you have to set the franchise back a little bit, take a risk on a guy like that?
If you believe in the player, yeah.
Rebecca, you say you self-analyze a lot and you're critical of yourself, but do you look back over the last 5 years and say it's a mistake we didn't take somebody, draft a quarterback above a fourth round?
Constantly. I think about the things that I've done wrong more so than I think about the things that have gone well. I mean, to me, when you're a competitor, that's how you grow and get better in this business, is to be critical of yourself.
What stopped you? Was it not believing in the players? What stopped you from getting that guy in?
I think it's a number of factors. I mean, I think it can be, where you had them ranked on your board. Maybe the compensation scared you to go get a player in terms of draft picks. A lot of different things that, again, that I use moving forward. It really is a chip on my shoulder to challenge myself how I can get better.
Coach, Steve was just saying about how young players are going to have to make an impact this year. As a coach, how do you see rookies and specifically coming into the league and being able to make an impact? I mean, are you wary of the learning curve? How do you kind of see that?
No, not really, Darren. I think the biggest thing, again, and Steve talked about, we want to make sure that we get the right fit. And I've been in a situation in the past where, we've taken 5th, 6th round guys, free agent guys, and they came in and performed for us and performed well. And I think the biggest thing is making sure that we get the right guy with the right traits. And most importantly, I think I have a coaching staff that, number one, are great teachers, all right, outstanding communicators, and guys that can develop players. That's what this league is all about, in my opinion. As Steve just mentioned, we know exactly what we're going to get in the first and second round, the bells and whistles. But, I think this staff, the scouting department, the scouts, personnel, these coaches, has done a tremendous job in trying to find some of those down-the-line guys that we've identified already that we feel like can come in and really contribute this year. So,
Steve, going to a 4-3, do you have to change your approach at personnel when you're drafting players now?
I mean, there's some tweaks that we've talked about, but I think it's, one of the things that I think is talked about a little too much is the 3-4 outside backer versus the defensive end. Number one, can you rush the passer and can you stop the run? So many times we've had guys, Marcus Golden and Chandler Jones, both played 4-3 defensive end coming out of college. And they made the transition one way, and now they're going to make the transition back. Bottom line, can you rush and can you stop the run? But really just some tweaks in terms of where they line up on your board, how the position's set. But we're just trying to find physical guys that can run.
Assuming you guys stay at 15, talk about your options with that pick in terms of a defensive player, a certain type of offense, and who you think will be there. There's probably 7, 8 guys you think will be there. How are you going to decide these kind of things?
Well, I'll start. I probably won't take a specialist there. But, so no, what we'll do is we'll rank those guys, 1 through 120 starting on Thursday, and we'll have those discussions for our team. They got to get through that cardinal filter that we've talked about before, whether it's schematical fit, smarts, toughness, competitiveness, passion, all those things that we're looking for in the DNA that Coach talked about.
But you're open to any kind of a position player then, right? Best available or not?
If a guy is graded a 88 on our scale, which is a very high grade, and we have a need at a position where the highest graded player at that point is a 78, we're taking the highest graded player. Again, I say it all the time, our needs in April and May are never the same as they are in October. Needs are always changing. You can never have enough good players.
Seems like you always would like to have cornerbacks, so what's the cornerback crop in this year's draft?
It's good. Yes, I think there's quality at the top, the middle, and the back end of guys who can not only contribute but contribute early. I mean, there's some polished players in the top part of the draft, in my opinion, and there's some guys that I think have the right traits that you can find in the middle rounds as well.
You have a good idea about the top of this draft and how it's going to play out 8 days before. It's the Lions season. People like to joke about, but do you yourself have a pretty good idea?
I mean, I think you like to think that you know some of the guys, but there's always going to be a guy in the first 14 picks that's a surprise. Happens every year.
Steve, when you look back at your first draft in 13, what are one true lessons that you took from that you're still using today?
You know, I would say that just trusting the system. I mean, I think it's one of those deals that, you know, as a first-time GM, there are certainly mistakes that I made that I look back on now. But, you know, I was just watching some film the other day, and it reminded me that Jonathan Cooper was actually starting for the Dallas Cowboys this year, and because I was watching another player on tape. And I guess it's been so long I forgot we drafted him. But anyways, I mean, you know, sometimes you can't forecast certain things. You can't forecast injuries. That's one part of it, especially for guys who have never been injured in college. But, you know, I think it's just sticking to your beliefs and, again, continuing to tweak the system and finding out why guys have had success. And really the ones that have had success are the guys who are competitive as hell and can learn it and can process information. And if they can't do any of those things, we got to make sure we steer clear of them.
Those guys do have those things, but they don't have the classic measurables. Is that one of the more difficult things from a personnel man standpoint, is trying to almost take that leap of faith? Like, here's a guy who doesn't have the measurables, but he's got the production in college.
Constantly challenges you because we are, as evaluators, whether you're a scout or whether you're a coach, you're enamored with the tools, the height, weight, and speed, the stuff that Ron Wolfley had coming out of West Virginia. But there are certain guys that they stick and they roster and they play for a long time for the reasons we just talked about, because they love it, because they can learn it, because they're instinctive, things that you can't coach.
How'd your visit go with Baker? Good.
Good.
What do you like about him?
What I like about Baker? Competitiveness, passion.
And you don't have to worry about that there, I guess, at that point, right, with him.
15? I don't know. Where's he going to go?
Who's in the room when you set the 120 board?
Our scouts, our coordinators, coach, myself.
Coach, have you enjoyed this process?
Yes.
First time as a head coach, have you enjoyed that?
It's been great. I think the biggest thing really is just what Steve talked about before. It's just really being on the same page. And the word that I like to use is trust. You know, I think we trust one another. Our vision is in line with one another. We sort of see things the same way and how we want to really shape and build this roster. So it's been a great process. And I'm glad Steve did not say yes to your answer about he knew exactly how it was going to shape out, because he and I were going to go buy a lottery ticket after this. But because you never know. But it's been a great process. It really has.
Coach, you have a reputation of developing players, as you've said, especially in the secondary. Once you get past guys with the bells and whistles, what do you look for when you look at defensive backs further down in the draft?
Well, someone just mentioned about the measurables, and I'm not really keen on the measurables. I like them. There are attributes there, but I like to put on the film and really see how a guy plays. Steve talked about the passion, the love. You know, is that guy physical? You know, do you see him competing day in and day out, you know, first quarter, fourth quarter? And the kind of guys that we try to bring into the culture that we're setting here. You know, you get guys that, you know, you get enamored with at the combine. You know, I've seen them over the years, and all of a sudden they put on a uniform and then that doesn't translate over. So we really dig deep and really trying to find good football players that can come in and really help us, and they love the game.
Is that kind of what you guys saw in Josh Norman, for instance?
Of course, you know, and you always find guys like that love to compete, have passion for the game. Again, not really going to bring distractions outside of football, off the field. When you start talking about, in my opinion, those 4th, 5th, 6th priority free agents, I mean, you want good character guys as well, you know. So those are the things that we're looking for.
Steve, you mentioned throwing the trade chart out the window, and as you've gone through the years with the draft, day of the draft. Has your thinking evolved as far as those gut decisions, or have you always kind of had a feel for if you want to be aggressive or maybe let a trade proposal pass?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it goes back to the player that you covet. I mean, if you really are passionate about that particular player that you know can be a game changer, go get him. And again, sometimes it's more than you'd like to pay for him, but if you're convinced that that player can help you, I don't think there's any reason. And we've tried to trade up in the past. In the past years that I've been the general manager, we've been aggressive in a lot of different areas and have tried to trade up, and you have to find the partner. That's the problem. You know, teams aren't always willing to trade. So when people talk about, you know, just trade back or trade up, it's not as easy as you think on draft day.
How's the wide receiver group here in terms of, I mean, you've got
The
some
group of
good
them?
ones later on.
Yeah, I mean, pretty good. I mean, there's some guys who have upside and talent, you know, when you talk about size and length and athleticism. And then there's some guys that maybe didn't run as fast, that are physical and can play inside and can do some of the gritty things that you look for. So there's a mixture of different types of players, and certainly some guys that we think can help us.
You analyze your own roster, which position groups have the best depth?
Where do we have the best depth? I'll let Coach answer.
Well, I think when you look at it across the board, I would say this. I mean, we're looking to improve across the board. And I don't think it's one position that you can say really stands out. I thought we did a tremendous job in the offseason, really trying to fill some voids right there in the offensive line. You know, so now it puts you in a position in the draft to where you may not feel the need to maybe pull the trigger as fast. But I like what we did there, and I think that's a necessity because I believe everything that we do starts up front in both phases, offensive and defensive line. So I think there's improvement across the board. So I wouldn't really say that we have depth at any position, really.
The hard part for us, and I think when you know, for example, I sit in my office and I look at the depth chart, and it's hard for me to look at any position and see it as a strength, because in my position, you really have to be critical, and you always have to be striving to get better. And to me, I see more so holes than I see strengths. So it's a challenge every day of trying to find guys, whether it's, you know, free agents out there, whether it's guys in the draft or college free agents. But you're always trying to get more depth at every position, and you're trying to make improvements. And again, I see more so holes than I see strengths.
In preparing for next week, have you two disagreed on players?
I can't think of any that we talked about in the meeting so far. And if we did, I wouldn't tell you.
Personnel situation. They had a guy last year who had the best year of his career on defense, Tyvon Branch, got hurt. Where is this team with Tyvon? Are you guys interested in bringing him back?
Well, we certainly haven't shut the door. You know, right now he's rehabbing. I believe he's back in Florida, and just, you know, we're monitoring the situation and staying in touch with Tyvon.
When a quarterback is sitting end of first round, possible early second round, why do you think teams will go and grab a guy like that? I mean, it's a
In the late one? Late one? Yeah. Because of the fifth-year tender. I mean, to me, again, supply and demand at the position, hard to find, hard to develop, not enough time to develop sometimes. That fifth-year option provides you the ability to have a little more time with them, to be able to have cost certainty at that position, which can get out of control at times if a guy has any type of success. So I think that fifth-year option is certainly something that is dangling out there that's enticing.
Good deal. Thank you both for your time.